everyone. Welcome to another episode of Second Chapter Careers. Today is a very, very special episode for me. I'm very honored to have Debbie Kodish here. She's not just a friend of mine, but also a personal mentor. And she has a fantastic story of career change, moving back, moving forward within two different specific realms, and I'm very, very excited to share her story and to hear all the details starting right now. So Debbie, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Can you start off by telling us about your college dreams? Where did you see yourself in college? What were your plans? How did you get started?
So I have sort of an interesting story. I went to GW, George Washington in DC, but before college I really just wanted to be a photographer, and my father wouldn't allow it. He's like, you got to get something, you got to do something that you can at least always know you can pay the bills, even whatever. I said okay. My father's an accountant, and that was sort of the easiest path for me. So I studied accounting and business in college, and my plan was that okay, I'll get my CPA, I'll get a degree, and then I'll figure out all the fun stuff I want to do after that. So that was sort of the entree in terms of, I loved studying business. So if I didn't like it, I probably wouldn't have lasted as much as I did. And basically by the time I was 20, I had graduated from university. And by 21, I was a CPA. So wow. The foundation was very incredible. Like, I was grateful for that launch into my career.
Okay, and so after college, did you get a job as a CPA? Where did you go from there?
I did. After college, I got a job. It's always a competitive, challenging market, but accounting seemed to be very highly in demand. And I got a job with one of the top, basically there were the top 8 accounting firms, and I went with the 9th because the 9th one focused on small business. And I moved back to Philadelphia from DC, and that was, small businesses to me was something that I was always kind of intrigued by, and I didn't want to be working on one company forever. So I went with the largest group out of Philadelphia. Unfortunately, 1 week into my job, they went under.
Oh no.
It was kind of like a big trauma thing. Basically, since I'm 15, I've been working for my father in between college or out of college. He's a CPA as well. He was a CPA as well. And he had a nice sized firm in the city in Philadelphia. And when this firm went under, 8 of the partners joined him. Wow. And the partner that I was assigned to merged with my father, which was totally crazy. And I ended up going into the firm. I didn't work on any of my father's clients, but I went into the firm working with the same clients I was working at in the other firm, that I was meant to be working on in the other firm, and got mentored by those partners. So I ended up staying there for 4 years.
And did you like it?
Before I made Aliyah. That's my...
Okay. And did you like it during that time?
Yes, I did actually. I learned a lot. You get a lot of discipline and skills, and I learned a tremendous amount. I learned a tremendous amount studying for the CPA, more than actually I learned in my 4 years of college. I felt like that was personal. And in accounting, I liked it. I liked the client side. I liked being in front of the clients. I liked working with the clients. I liked bringing them in. Basically, what happened is after 4 years, I found out I had a talent for bringing in business, and I brought in more business than some of the partners, new business. So I had a book of business that was quite large for someone who was 25 years old. And my father was devastated when I said I wanted to go to Israel for a year, but they let me go for a year, which turned into 31 years later. So I don't think he was so happy about that, nor did I see that coming, I have to say. That's a whole separate podcast, but yes. I basically thought I'd be back in a year because I was taking sort of a leave of absence, and I enjoyed it, but I enjoyed not necessarily doing the hardcore accounting work, which I did and I felt like I was good at, but that wasn't the exciting part of the job.
Okay. So fast forward, you got to Israel. How did you launch your career here?
So this is another interesting story, but the reason I actually got to Israel for the year was that partner that I was assigned to in that accounting firm, he got a letter in the mail from an accounting firm in Tel Aviv. And it was, I guess I was 24 years old at the time when that letter came, and I marched into his office and I said, who do you know at this firm in Tel Aviv? I want to work there for a year. I always wanted to go to Israel for a year or two and improve my Hebrew and be able to work with Israel from America. I didn't think that I would stay in Israel, but I had that in my head for many, many years for other reasons, not for this podcast also. So when I said to him, can we call him? He said, you work for me. What are you asking me? I said, well, it's like a year. Can you get me in the door? And we made a phone call that minute from his office. And
Wow.
the head partner of this very large firm in Tel Aviv said, okay, we'll hire. He vouched for me that I've been working with him for 4 years. And they said, okay, we'll hire you. We can't officially hire you until you get here. And I said, well, I'm a conservative CPA. I can't get on the plane and come to you if you don't give me a job. What am I going to do?
Welcome
so then
to
it got in
Israel.
my head that I should, what?
Welcome to Israel. That's how everything goes on the fly.
I know. I didn't want to I'm too conservative by nature not to have a job when I get to the other side of the ocean. But I ended up finding a program that was in Arad. It was called Wujus, and it was half a year that I could learn Hebrew because I only knew 5 words. I didn't know any Hebrew. I was crazy. And he wanted me for international accounting, so it was fine for the firm. And that I would come here and go and work and go to this program for 6 months, and the other 6 months you work. So I would just place myself in this firm for those 6 months, whereas this program will help you find a job, but it's usually not at this caliber. They're usually just more kind of lower level, but not necessarily can they find you the best jobs in your field. So 3 weeks after I got to Israel, I went to this program, and then I went to their offices, and they gave me an offer on the spot, and they told me the salary. And I said to them, I am not doing accounting for that salary.
Again, welcome to Israel.
Do you have any good, total chutzpah. I said, do you have any good clients that I could go work for? Like, I want to do investments. Can you find me someone? And that's how I found Bank Leumi. He made a phone call to the president of the bank, and he said, take her. And they took me. And I ended up, after the 6 months, working for a year at Bank Leumi as an analyst. I learned, basically what I learned there was my Hebrew, because there's not a word of English. So that was my Army service in a lot of, not compared to what Army service is today, but back then I felt like it was more of this boot camp for me because I didn't know what was flying. I didn't know the Hebrew, and nobody spoke a word of English. I knew the accounting, and after about 3, 4, 5 months, I realized that my educational and experience was much greater than the department I was put into, and that they were not as senior as what I had thought when I walked in, and so I got a lot out of it. I mean, I did learn some analytical skills in the Hebrew and understanding the system, and I got a lot of knowledge from just living in Israel and environment and work. I actually took a lower salary to go there than what the accounting firm offered me. But if I was coming for the year, I didn't care about my salary so much because I thought I was going back, which I didn't. And I lasted only a year before, and then I moved on to proper investment banking, I would say.
Okay. So how long were you in proper investment banking? And for those who are not familiar with the industry, maybe also just give like a little bit of background to what does investment banking involve? Because everybody knows accounting, pretty much what it entails, but investment banking is kind of, a little lesser known.
So I need to take you back a little bit to the fact that this is 1994 when I made Aliyah. Okay. And I started in 95 in basically moving into what is called investment banking. What were we doing? It was a startup. If I tell you how I found this startup, I was in a bar. I met people that wanted to do a startup. I said, okay, I'll join you. There were 4 of us, 5 of us maybe, in the early years. 2 guys founded it. No investment banking experience whatsoever. But Israelis are so resilient, and they have all the oomph to get these things going. So I was like, I'm along for the ride. I can't be any worse than what I'm doing at Bank Leumi. Basically, what we were doing in this startup that I went to in investment banking was we were working with fund managers around the world, convincing them to invest in the Israeli stock market. And in the Israeli stock market, there were no foreign investors in 1994. Basically, everyone had fled the Israeli market because it had a big crash in 93, I think it was, about maybe 92. And so it was very limited, and it's a small market. So no one was really covering it in terms of being an analyst, so foreign investors were not investing. So their idea, really their idea, I have to give, we all built the idea together later, but the original core idea was theirs, and still, in touch with some of them today. They really wanted to convince the world to invest in Israel. And they sold me. That was where my heart was. My heart was not about being an investment banker, which is raising money for things and helping companies get launched. And that's what investment banking does, right? It raises money for a company or a fund or for the markets, and it helps grow these companies in these markets, creates jobs, does a lot of really good for the market when you're really, in it. But I was in it for all heart. I was not in it to be an investment banker. I didn't even really also know what it truly meant back then, and I was 26 at that point, to be an investment banker, but I knew that I could convince people around the world to invest in Israel. I was convinced. We had what it was taking. It was the beginning of tech. It was the beginning of so many exciting things. And I don't want to take too much time about this, but I literally traveled around the world European world. America was the last to come to Israel, but I was in a different country every month, a couple days a month, and I was bringing a map. I was sharing with them. Again, I was selling Teva, I was selling Bank of Podim, I was selling. There's not that many stocks to sell in Israel back then. It was basically 10 stocks we were covering. And we would go around and convince them why they should invest in Israel. And what happened from that business, which just to fast forward a little bit, but we did that for 2 years. We had one client that was basically paying all our bills that was trading with us. We created a trading platform. That was one of the partners' expertise. He created a trading platform, allowed people to trade with us by fax, used to send, and all these crazy ways we used to do this. And in 1996, which we knew was coming, that was kind of our research, it said Israel should be 2% of your portfolio. And in that following year, we did a $500 million turnover on the Israeli market.
Amazing.
That was the explosion that happened. So we were in like this wave, and we grew the business to about 120 employees. And in 1998, we went public. And 2002, we took it off the market, and it was sold privately. The whole business was sold. And today it's called Excellence, and it has about 600 employees. It's like
Wow.
Still going strong.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's an unbelievable story from a new immigrant who started from nothing.
That's like, well, yeah, by the time I was 29, I was like, what just happened to me? You know, I didn't sleep for those 4 years, but I didn't know really what was flying. There's a lot more that happened in those 4 years and a lot of cool stories. But that was, you know, we didn't even know how to write research about our companies here. I called all of my friends in the banks, my friends from college who were working in investment banks, and I said, could you send me your research reports? I need to know how to speak to these people. And that is how, and we're all self-taught in the firm. We were like writing research. We were looking at how they did it. We were doing modeling. I was the only CPA in the group. So I was doing all the modeling. I was doing all this work that I had learned from my earlier years going, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Am I doing it right? But thank God it went right. It was really good.
That is such an inspiring story just right there. There's so much to unpack. But the purpose of this podcast is to talk about the pivot. So fast forward a little more and tell us, you know, obviously there's a big change coming. Why don't you just jump right in?
Well, there's two changes that happened. That's a great question. So when we sold the business, so my first daughter was born during the IPO of the first IPO. So I was still involved after the IPO, but she was born. It was crazy time. And once we went public, as a mother, I was traveling every month. I mean, people know me now, I still travel a lot. But then I was really traveling, like all Europe. I was in China all the time. I was in all countries in Europe. We were working with, our clients were all these very large banks, you know, these banks in Amsterdam, these banks in Luxembourg, these banks in Hong Kong. So like we had to go visit our clients all the time. I couldn't do that anymore. I had to pivot. I was like, what am I going to do? So I was actually happy when we made the sale. I would have loved, you know, looking out now where we are, I would love to still be a shareholder in that business. And I'm sorry that I'm not, but it wasn't an option. So I decided to open up my own firm in 2000 called Kesha Capital. It's the firm I have today. And I started to do financial advising and capital raising, sort of like a boutique investment bank, if you want to call that. A big shift from the public markets. Those last 5 years were all public. But staying in public is very regulatory, very busy, very hard back then. So I didn't want to do that with kids. And I needed to figure out how I was going to continue to work, help support the family. And so I set up this boutique firm. I ended up with about 5 employees at the time. And for the next 10 years, I would say, maybe a little more, we raised money for the venture funds in Israel. So venture was just beginning. So everything was like a first-time fund. And again, it was me going out to sell Israel to investors. The very first fund I said I would do it for, which I didn't know what I was doing. So sometimes you just don't know what you're doing. You say, I could figure it out. I figured I could figure it out. I didn't. They were having a hard time raising money. And I went with them. I set up all these meetings in Europe and we traveled. I basically, again, this is with the phone. It's no email, none of this. Picked up the phone and I said, okay, I was doing public business with you for all these years. Who does private? And he would be like, Joe, here, take the phone. And he would hand the phone to the guy next to him that did private. And I was like, oh, now I've got an entree into the private market, which is different than public. I'm not sure what your viewers know, but that was my entree. And before I knew it, we were able to raise about $25 million for this Israeli fund. The total size of the fund was 80. Wow. And they thought we were brilliant, and I thought it was so easy. And I'm in the best business in the world. And then it was never that easy again because we hit the Intifada. Israel didn't become as desirable. This is the early 2000s, so now we're in, late 2000, and it's not as easy anymore. So I continued to do it, and thank God we were very successful in the business. It was the kind of business that I could take like 3 clients a year and do nicely. Mm-hmm. And if I took 10, if I took more, I guess I would have done better, but I was raising a family. So that was a big pivot to figure out what can I do that's not going to be taxing on my family, but still use all my skills. And in addition, I would help companies raise capital by small companies. I their boards and I would help them. So I was pivoting in all that work. And that was like another decade of my life, which sounds crazy because I feel like it's all like so bad.
Okay. I want to ask you, before we move on, since you hit on motherhood a little bit, first of all, I have two questions and you can answer them in any order you want. First of all, if you can paint a picture of what a day would look like as, an investment manager while you're having kids, and also as a frum woman in a predominantly male industry. I know because I worked in finance for 12 years. I was the only woman in every room, the only frum person in most of the rooms. I think a lot of listeners and a lot of people out there are probably curious, how did you manage that and how did that look for you in terms of lifestyle and your values?
It's a great question. It was very hard. I guess now looking back, I do see that I was a bit of a trailblazer. I think I would have, and I don't want to say that if I wasn't a woman, but if I was in a normal, typical day, I probably would have been doing even, different things than what I did, right? But I was happy to be doing what I was doing because I was really enjoying what I was doing and I was making an impact and I didn't have to work all the hours that most people. I mean, I had to work a lot of hours. I wouldn't say that, but I could work a lot of hours on my own schedule. That's having my own company. There was no other choice for me because I could not even imagine after my first kid was born that I wanted to go work on someone else's schedule. Now, you work on your client's schedule, but I can sort of maneuver that. So one of the things I did is I would have this sort of out of office between 4 and 7 every day. You could not reach me between 4 and 7. And we didn't have the phones like we do today, and everybody can reach you whenever they want. So I had to put, I would not make it. So I would work, my kids were in a structured kind of a program or plays or babysitting or whatever until about 4. And then I was all in as a mother from 4 to 7. And my husband was working, and so he was kind of in his schedule. And the deal is that he would come home around 6 so we could overlap for that hour and kind of get the kids to bed. But by 7 I was off and back on the phones with America because I had to be back on America. So I would have from 7 to 10. I mean, sometimes it'd be 7 to midnight. I got a little bit of sleep. I didn't need a lot of sleep back then. I need a lot more sleep now than I did then. But I didn't need a lot of sleep, and so I didn't care. But I would take 7, let's say 7 to 11, and I was either working or getting some time with my husband. And it wasn't Sundays I didn't have to work. So that's really Monday through Thursday. But I would take one of those days, usually Tuesday nights or something, and I would say, I'm not making any calls tonight. That's not my night. So it's 3 nights a week I would really go back to my desk at 7 and really run and try and have 2 days where I didn't have to do that. I mean, Israel runs, I don't know where your viewers are watching from, but we run Sunday to Thursday. So Sunday was always a chill day for me. I didn't even work a lot during the day. I didn't have so really I had to pack it all in Monday through Thursday. And one of those nights I would try to take off if I had somewhere to be, or we had an event, or we wanted to go out for dinner, we did date night. So there was definitely nights when I didn't work. I was all in, and the interesting thing is sometimes I would even pick my kids up at 1:30 because that's in Israel how in the afternoon when their gone ended, I'd bring them home and I'd have a babysitter at home help me from till 4. Somebody in America wanted to do due diligence on me and called somebody in my neighborhood, a woman in my neighborhood. I wasn't super close with them, but they were the husband was in business and they did a business together and they were very prominent. I wasn't super close to them, but our kids went to gone together. So I would see her every day at 1:30 picking up the kids. I'd bring them home and then I'd go back to work. And they called to ask about me and working with me. And they go, she doesn't work. I see her every day at 1:30 picking up her kid. I was like, oh my God, I had to call her and say okay, I have a pretty big business. Can you not say that to people? Because I'm going to lose the client. So I had this again, when I was in my community, I didn't really share with everybody what I was doing because I just had my head down. You're so busy with your kids and with this. I just plowed forward. I wasn't really thinking. My neighbors I didn't really do business with my neighbors. My clients were kind of in Tel Aviv and my investors were all over the world. So I was just, so that was what a typical day looked like. Was there a second question? I can't remember.
I had asked about being a religious woman in that type
so the women issue and religious was, I definitely have many stories. I don't think it's for now either. It's a whole other podcast on how to be. I remember walking into a conference. I don't know if anybody knows about the Israel Venture Association. They have these conferences every year and everyone came out. I don't know if they do them as much this year, but The very first one was a conference that I attended. And back then I was wearing a hat. So I walked in with a hat on my head, and there were only 4 women in the whole room. And of course, I was the only one in a hat that was sort of religious, and they didn't understand. I didn't know what to do with it. I was like, whatever, I just have to keep going. So I just ignored all the comments. I definitely think that there was some, I would say, in the pricing of what I did and how I did it, people tried to push me because I was a woman. They tried to push it lower. I got very strong very early, meaning I think hard about my pricing. I think hard about what I do, and you don't have to work with me. Like, it's okay. And I got to a position pretty quick in my business world where really I didn't care. Meaning I loved the work I did, and if you're the right client, then you pay for what you need me to get done. And if not, and I remember that there was a deal I did. I raised money, so some of the major part of my compensation can be when I close a deal. So I do have a retainer, and there was kind of a structure. So a lot of the structure is at the back end if we're successful, or I'll have shares or whatever. I was literally going in to give birth, I think, to my 3rd kid, and I was in my 9th month, and we were working on a project, and we only started the project like in my 8th month of pregnancy. They don't know I'm pregnant. I'm doing everything kind of on the phones and whatever. I mean, they knew I was pregnant, I think. They did know I was pregnant, but they didn't realize how soon I was giving birth. And, basically made 3 phone calls. I made a few phone calls, but in those time of my 8th, 9th month, I made a bunch of phone calls, and I raised the amount of money that they needed literally in about 4 weeks. That doesn't happen. That's like these few stories happen like, a few times in your career. They don't happen like that. And I'm literally driving to the hospital, and the head of the firm calls and says, like, I don't know that we should pay you what we said. It was 4 weeks, like, of your time. And I said to the person on the other line is, you're going to pay whatever. I mean, I said it nicely, like, you'll pay whatever the invoices, because I did the job. Doesn't matter. I said to them, do you know how many years I have to know this person for them to just write a check within 4 weeks to your firm? I said, I've flown thousands of miles. I've had many dinners. I've had this. And I'm like, there's nothing to talk about. I got to go. I'm in labor. Hung up the phone. I mean, the money was in the bank like a week later, and he felt horrible and it was a guy, and he felt horrible that he made that, like, comparison. But I also had to think logically. Tough time to explain to him, like, I don't really want to hear it, and I'm not going to fight with you, and this is the bill. Like, but it, those were kind of interesting stories as a mom, as a woman, as trying to go into labor and trying to work. It's crazy.
So what's the best advice you can give to someone, let's say, just starting a career in finance, who is having these concerns about balancing it all without compromise?
So it's interesting. I worked a good 10 years before I had my first child. I mean, I was 29, but I had been maybe 9 years, whatever. I'd been working since I'm 20. And I had built up, before my first child was born, a pretty strong foundation. So one of the things is it's very different if you have kids young and you're just starting out. Let's say you have kids and you're just getting into your career. But whatever you're doing, you just need to keep building the foundation, right? And it's setting boundaries, but in the same sense, we're in a world where people don't want to work as hard like they're starting out. And I think starting out, I don't know what it's like today, but we put in a lot of our dues and a lot of hours. I worked a lot of hours before my kids came, when I could be more flexible. So there are going to be times, I would say that as a mother, my kids needed me a whole lot more as they got older. And if you have young kids, just try and put in all the hours. They need you at bedtime. They need you for that, like, to get them out in the morning. They need all that love, but they can be taken care of for a chunk of hours. And they do go to sleep earlier, and then they stop that pretty quickly. But I think that while your kids are young, put in whatever hours you can to get your foundation built and get your niche built and whatever it may be. And, it can happen quicker today, right? A lot of the work we had to do to build our businesses earlier took a lot more. We didn't have the resources, research, the web. We didn't have any of this, like internet, to figure out AI. We couldn't figure out. We had to figure everything out, which created a stronger foundation, but took a lot more years. I feel like people could do and learn what I did much quicker than what it took us. So maybe it'll be more efficient, but I used every hour that, thank God I have an amazing husband, but I used every hour, because he could have been more, upset about my hours, but he was proud. He was proud of watching me. He was my sounding board. Even when I was working in the evenings, I would get off a call and I would, he would be my complete sounding board. He was my partner in this. So also don't try and do it alone. If you don't have a partner, you have a good friend or whatever, or you're building a business, it's not, I did a lot on my own early. I wouldn't say I ever did it on my own because I feel like I really had my husband by my side. But and I had people that worked for me, but sometimes we need to take that and either take our time and don't be so quick, and also build our foundation and get stronger in what we're good at. I just used what I was good at. It seemed to be finances.
Okay. So tell us then about your pivot into a totally different life, a different career, a different focus, all the good stuff.
Wow. Around, I guess it was about 2008, 2009, I was approached by investors of mine, actually, who I knew well, that were building a nonprofit, and they asked if I would help. Now, what they wanted my help with was just donors, because I was connected to so many investors. But most of my investors were not Jewish, actually, and this is a Jewish nonprofit. So they weren't really Jewish. They were global, they were institutional, but I was starting to build my high net worth individual market for the other things I was doing in my investment business over the earlier years just before that. That's actually how I met these investors, and they asked if I would come help, and I said I would come and help them. And so for about a year I helped them, not really for pay, nothing. I was just trying to bring in donors for them, and we were successful. And I was like, wow, that's not so hard. Just like you get these early successes and you're like, it's not so hard, and then it's really hard. Like, I don't know what happens. Sometimes I feel like sometimes Hashem gives you this, here's a little bit of success, but it's never that easy. And so ultimately, I was really loving it and wanting to build it. And it's called Maor, and we were working on college campuses, educating Jewish students about their identity and strengthening the campuses. And so it was very important work. And it meant a lot to me because we didn't talk about it, kind of a religious journey, but I wasn't raised in an observant home. I was raised in a conservative home, and I became religious along the way. And so I wish I had on college what this nonprofit was doing. So it spoke to me in a way that no other nonprofits were speaking to me at the time. And I really wanted to help this nonprofit succeed because I wanted, and it was at GW and it was at other, so I really wanted to make an impact. So I was just helping them lightly. So I did that. Ultimately, after about a year, I said, look, you can be a client of my firm, and I will spend 1 day a week working with you. And I told them the pricing, and I told them, and they were great, let's do it. So I spent about 1 day a week trying to build their database of investors, and that was it. I did that for quite a few years, but they were just like a client, and my investment firm was still running. And then it's like fast forward, I've pivoted a few times. I started a new partnership group. It didn't work out for a lot of reasons, and at the end of it was like a 2-year thing. From 2012 to 2014, I was working with a partnership group, and I wanted to exit it, and it was just from a healthy perspective, it wasn't the right fit for me. And I had a non-compete, and I really wanted to honor the non-compete, but the non-compete really was going to impact me tremendously, because if I stopped doing my investment business for a year, that's a pretty big impact. But I did want them to succeed, and I didn't want to hurt that, so I decided to go into the nonprofit. So they came to me and said, why don't you just come with us full-time for a year? So it wasn't really full-time, but I said to them I would come for like 50% time, and slowly but surely I'll get back into my investment business, which is what happened. So I ended up in 2014 pivoting into nonprofit, but actually running and building out this organization. We doubled the size of the group. We expanded it. We brought in CFO. We made it much more professional, and so that was really an incredible challenge. It's like working in a startup again and rebuilding it. And so that's what I was doing for the nonprofit. And I am to this day still an advisor on that nonprofit, but over the last number of years, I have scaled back tremendously. And they're still doing great, thank God. And I've been focused, and I pivoted again. So when I came out of that business, I didn't really want to compete with the other firm. The other firm ended up closing, but I didn't want to compete with them so heavily. So I went and sat on boards and helped a few companies get to the next stages in their business world. And one of those groups, we sold the company. I helped them sell. I was with them for about 5 years, and we sold the business a few years ago. That was a tremendous, an amazing experience, and I enjoyed it very much. And over the last, I would say, since I started to go into the wealth management business. Just a whole nother story on what that means, but that's really managing money. And what I wanted to do was take all of my years in the public markets, the private markets. There's some real estate experience in there as well, which I didn't get into, but taking it all into the basket and advising clients on their entire portfolios and managing those. So that's what I actually do today.
Okay. But before we talk about today, let's go back to like the almost 10 years, I guess, that you were at Maor. First, let's talk about the skills that you were able to use to pivot from raising money to raising donations. Obviously, even I can hear that it's kind of like the same type of selling skills, but there's a very different vibe when you're raising money for someone to get a huge return versus when you're raising money for someone to get nothing in return. So talk about that.
It's such a great point, but I will tell you that if someone invests $1 million in a company and it doesn't go well, of course they're devastated. They don't like it. I'm just making up numbers. But if they do it and the company did everything it was supposed to do and still failed, maybe the whole market pivoted, maybe something happened, maybe a competitor came and swooped them away. Okay, if they could invest $1 million, they could lose $1 million. Okay, that's usually the fuss. I'm just using big numbers to make it. If someone were to invest in a nonprofit $1 million and the nonprofit went under, they would be just as devastated as the $1 million they lost in the business. Usually, I'm sure there's people out there that would say yes or no or make comment, but it's still painful, right? So what did I do my whole career? My whole career, when I was doing an investment, I needed to love and feel what I was doing, that it was a great business, a great company, a great fund, the people were good. Half of my due diligence is around, 75 or 80% is the people, right? When I do things, people invest in people and people donate to people. Even though they love the mission, if you love the mission and someone you don't like comes to your door, you're going to tell them, I'm not investing in this. Even if I want to feed the poor, I want to do things, I don't want to do it through you. So you're also, on the second hand, you're giving people an opportunity. I always felt like in the investment space, I'm giving you an opportunity to make serious money and help your money grow and to help create hundreds of jobs, right? That's in the investment side. We created so many jobs. I can't even explain so much I'm proud of for this country and how it's grown. And if I named all the companies, my office was next to Checkpoint when it had 7 people. Like, if I tell you what has experienced, it's a whole nother podcast. It's so incredible. That's what you're doing. You're giving people an opportunity to help grow, to make change in the world. Like, I mean, today I use Checkpoint. Today I use the firewall. I'm cracking up at myself, laughing, going, oh my God, when I watched them move upstairs with 200 people, it's what we've been creating in this country has been incredible. So when you go to nonprofit, you also want to give people, you have tzedakah dollars to give somewhere. I want to help you give it. Like, I can really help you give your money to a good place. And if you want to invest in the poor, okay. So I sent them to places that, the Yad Eliezer's and the other places where I felt really confident about those nonprofits and said, okay, so you can give to the poor. But if you want to help, in this case, in the Maor case, which was the Jewish souls, then I want to give you an opportunity to do that. And you're going to give tzedakah. You're going to give it somewhere. I'm talking about either the alumni or the larger, donors. So I felt like the skills were the same passion I was trying to convey. Like, if I can give you an opportunity, I'm in the business of raising money. I don't care about asking for money. I ask people for money all day long. Like, whatever, profit, nonprofit. That's just the world that my brain comes into. It doesn't bother me. You can say no. I'm okay. I can make a whole movie on rejection. I don't care. You can reject me. It's up to you. You don't want the opportunity. Okay, no problem. Let's move on. Right? I'll move to something else, or I'll turn a no to yes, which I also can give a lecture on. But in trying to turn a no into yes, and that's the same exact skills were really. I always said, how come someone who's not an investment banker actually raised money for nonprofits? Because there's a lot of similar skills in what I was doing, and I was, I wasn't just raising money, and I was raising money, but I was really working to help the organization also communicate better, build a better database, all the things that I had to do in the other business, and build a database and communicate well to my clients, investors, donors, whatever you want to call them. The same skills were translating pretty interestingly into being in the for-profit and non-for-profit. So I felt like I was given a little bit of a gift. I really loved my donors became investors in other things, and the investors became donors. I didn't really, again, tzedakah, and business is business. I kept it very Chinese wall, but I felt like I was really giving over I was using some of the similar skills that I had to use when I would go on road trips for business. The only thing with nonprofit is about 50% of those meetings people would cancel when you get on the road. In business, they don't cancel your meetings. So I was like, what? Everyone cancels my meeting? I don't understand. You're canceling me, but I'm the nonprofit person coming to you. So I'm the first one canceled if they have something going on. I was like, that was the only thing. I would make these trips to America and everyone would cancel on me. I was like, you can't do that. I just flew in from Israel. So then I used the guilt factor that I flew in from Israel. Don't change it. I'm not going to be back for another month or two.
So, from a personal standpoint, not which do you love more, but where did you find the most fulfillment? Was it in the big wins of business or in the warm and fuzzies of the nonprofit? I think a lot of people really struggle with that dichotomy of doing good in the world versus doing things in the world, which can also be good, but it's not in the same box as the nonprofit, which has its own, people say it's the warm and fuzzies of working there.
Right. I've gotten, thankfully, throughout the career, let's say now it's 35 years, I guess, I don't know, whatever it is, 37 years, that I've been in business and in nonprofit and both, and doing a lot of different things. I mean, every time I'm successful in a closing or in a deal or with a great client and a great company or a great client and a great fund, and I see a match, I see a good match, it's like making a shidduch. If you're like the person that's going to put two people together and that's what I do all day long, right? Like it's really getting people, because when I look at a company, and I would raise money for a company or a fund, I want them to have good people on the other side that they'll get along with. And I didn't want to work anybody that I couldn't, let's say, connect with, or something was off. I don't want to work with them. And so it was very easy for me to say no. So in the same sense, I've had these incredible moments in both places. One story that I had, I don't know whether they'll look it out, but I had gone into a donor once. And I'm not a nonprofit fundraiser professional that took all these, I didn't do nonprofit management and nonprofit fundraising, so it was just a lot of learning. But we were in a very tough situation, and I remember that I ended up flying to America for one meeting for this, like not one meeting, but I went for those meetings, and I said, we really need $1 million, like I don't know what I'm going to do. And more or less I walked into the donor's office, and for various reasons I said, like, listen, we had a lot of things we needed to do with this donor on other stuff, and he's somebody I do business with and this, and I said, look, we really need $1 million more. And he said, okay. That was the first 2 minutes of the meeting. I was like, I'm like, you said okay. So I had to go into a whole nother part of the meeting for 2 hours about business, because it was a business and a nonprofit meeting. And I'm like, at the end of the meeting, I'm like, but you still said okay. I remember coming out of that meeting, like my heart was pounding, like I was so appreciative and proud and happy. And it was going to change the face. It really changed the face of Maor. It really changed it. I got the most intense, incredible feeling from something like that happening, and it happens on a few occasions throughout my career, more when they come very large like that, or somebody really significant is making a huge impact. And it wasn't a 2-minute ask. I did give myself about a 5-minute ask. I'm giving it to you in 1 minute. But those kinds of moments are like, it was 2 a.m. in Israel. I called the Israel team. I woke everybody up. Like, this happened, everyone get up. We have to it was very meaningful, and it happened a few times in business. Look, the other things happened too. I could work all year on something that fell apart. So we've had moments on all sides, but you get them in both places. I wouldn't say that one was more than the other. I think they were just different, and I'm just proud of the moments that I could write about different things that we've, I would say together with the Kodish Baruch Hu, it's not me alone, that was able to actually help execute some very meaningful transactions, business, nonprofit, for-profit, and create those moments.
So incredible. Without revealing too much about your age, but you did mention you've been working for over 30 years, and you did start something new within the past few years. So it's safe to say you're closer to retirement than not closer to retirement. I get a lot of questions from people who are afraid to start something new so close towards when they want to retire. I'm not saying everyone needs to retire at 65 or 67. But if you want to enjoy your later years, a lot of people are eyeing that milestone. So what's your advice for people who want to make a change at this point in their lives?
It's a great question. I think that I can remember, I don't mind telling my age. Okay, so I'm 57. So I remember when I turned 50, which was 7 years ago. And I remember saying, 50 comes, and it says it in the Torah, comes with wisdom, real wisdom. And I woke up on like my 50th birthday, and I'm like, well, you know what? I have all this wisdom on all these years. And I sort of was like, one of those people that I just put my head down and I worked, and I had client after client. I have never, in all the years since 2000, since I've had my company, and even in the nonprofit, they work through my company. Everyone's a client of my company. Okay, so even though I was spearheading it, I was always doing, a few things in the company. So in all those years, I've never not been without a client. Like, consistent pool of clients. And I was always with my head down, working very hard. But I'm also a sponge and wanting to learn. And I was learning and I was learning and I was processing. And I took some time literally to whiteboard out like what I'm really good at, what's really good, what's really working for me, what should I be doing going forward. And now I'm looking at 50 and I'm looking down the next, whatever. I'm looking out saying, I want to make sure that I use these next period of time to really make sure I'm doing what I love and what I'm really good at and what I still can do to impact this world and Israel and, whatever else I can do in the business world. And I didn't want to just let it go. And I became, and I thankfully am in a position where I can choose a lot of what I want to work on. I still want to work. Do I have to work? I could. I'm maybe in a little different position, but I love working and it motivates me, and I don't see sitting still. As long as it's not overpowering me, I'm so happy to keep going. And that's what I did. I made a big change around 50. That's when it happened, when I really started to go full force into this wealth management, and in addition to really still helping, obviously, the nonprofit, but those were the two main things that I spent my time on, and building it. And I built it very, very slowly because I was still doing a lot of other things. I was still sitting on boards. And so all of a sudden that started to take on, I started to really sit back and say, what do I love about what I do? And what do I really like to be involved with? And I wanted to get back more in the public markets, which is where my heart was in a lot of ways. I, have a great friend, Larry Holtz, who likes to talk about it with me. And it was really building a lot. Even COVID, we were bored, remember? We were just talking more and more. Sometimes you take a friend to sound out what it is I'm really good at. Mm-hmm. And it was a lot of those. So I have to give you a lot of credit because we spent more time. I said, I have to make sure I'm full force into this. Not only for my clients, for myself, for a lot of things we were doing, but it turned out that I was able to really build a really nice book of clients and work with them on their investments and doing things. And I went back to sort of basics where I was working, so many years ago, but it's what I love. And I think all the years experience I had in the middle just made me better at this age. I'm not sure I would have been good at what I'm doing today 15 years ago. I think I would be okay. I think I could have done it and I could have built a great business, and I'm not saying I couldn't have done it, but I know that I'm stronger now and I'm more knowledgeable now, and I have such amazing contacts and I have such amazing partners. Today what I do is and I don't do it alone. I mean, I have my own company and I have partners that work with me on managing my clients. So it's an incredible structure that I built. And I wouldn't have been able to do that 15 years ago. I would have just gone and worked for somebody, and I might have sold my soul somewhere that I didn't really want to sell my soul. Like I might have done something I didn't want to do. So I think it all kind of worked out in the way that it had to work. And it's really the last, I would say, 7 years is all new. I don't think that getting into your 50s, it could be in your 60s, but usually if you've had 30 years of work experience, 20 years of work experience, whether you didn't work for the first 10 years because you were managing your house as, let's say, a woman, you got many skills if you're managing your house full time. It's crazy, I think that we have a lot more skills than we give ourselves credit for as a woman. And therefore, if you're, let's say, in your 50s or even early 60s, whatever you are, in terms of wanting to do something new, but I would look at what you've really been kind of strong at, or what skills you accumulated all your life, and how can that help another person, whether that's coaching, whether that's other things you're doing. But so many things people are strong at, and they just don't have the confidence, and that's building confidence to sit back, whiteboard it out, work with a friend, work with your spouse, work with somebody, your kids, whoever, and you really might find that you have what to contribute, and it really can help in retirement. Because if you want to go into retirement but you don't have enough, maybe it's elevating those skills to make it a much smoother. My biggest joy now is to work with a lot of people that are going into retirement or they're headed into it, and let's say in the next 10 years or even and making sure they're well prepared, because a lot of people aren't so well prepared, unfortunately. So trying to get them to have, and that gives us a lot of calmness, right? That gives us a lot of ability to really appreciate life. Life's very short, so...
Well, I think you've given us so much to think about. I would love to just hear, as a final parting question, what would you tell 20-year-old Debbie who was just graduating from college and had a totally different vision of her life? 57-year-old Debbie who has built this amazing thing that she never could have dreamed of.
So, my God, that's like a powerful question to ask. I think that I personally always had a concern that I wanted to be able to support myself. I didn't know what my life was going to work out. I have an amazing husband, whatever, kids. Who knows? And I think I was telling myself back then, just make sure you're grounded, you have ability to make a living, and that you can do something. And so it's not that I would tell myself that, of course, I'm looking back and saying, okay, it'll all work out. You'll do what you're supposed to do. I had a lot of hard years. I wouldn't say everything's just smooth sailing all these years. It took a lot of hard work and a lot of things. I think I would have slowed down a little bit throughout the years, and sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. But it'll work out. I mean, whatever is supposed to be the plan is supposed to be the plan. And I think also finding more meaning in my life, getting more observant, taught me to appreciate Kodish that everything's going to happen for a reason in the right time. And like I said, if I look back and say, oh, I should have done this or I should have done that, why didn't I take that? And I'm I have a thirst for learning. So for me, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm listening, if you can't find me doing nothing, I will figure out what to watch or what to see or what to learn. Or what masterclass to take, even though I know I could probably give half of them, some of them today. But I still appreciate learning, listening, and just, like I said, I think I would feel a little bit calmer. I think I was always calm about I was very carefree. So I do think, but I am grateful for the foundation that I built and that I did have the educational side. And so for my younger self, I'm proud of that. I don't know that when I was in high school I had that same thought process. I was a good student, but I was passionate about more. I'm very artistic, and I think that's why I was able to do a lot of interesting things in business, because of my artistic side. Is I was able to structure things and see things that people didn't see. So when I would structure a deal, or I would structure something for work, or I would recreate something for somebody, I realized that it's actually my artistic talent of the photography that I loved so much as a kid that comes out in my visual side of me. So I don't feel bad. My husband asked me even yesterday, he's like, are you ever go back to photography? I take a lot of pictures of my family, which annoys them, but I don't, I love it so much. I actually always think about uploading my photos because I still take photos all day long. But it's just more a joy for me, and that's okay. I'm happy to have that hobby and that joy. And I think that, I don't know if it answered the question per se, but I do feel that I do feel proud of what I had back then, and also it would be great to know that looking forward, everything's going to work out. I don't know if I ever knew what that was going to look like being so young. When you're young, you're looking at the next maybe a year or two. You're not looking at what's going to be in 20 years. I never saw that far ahead when I was younger. And then I get into investments, and that's all we think about is far ahead. And so that's kind of funny that I've been doing that the last number of years. When I was younger, I think when you're younger, you don't have that same visual. You're just kind of getting through the day. When you have a lot of kids or you have this, it's very hard to think very long term. And so, I try to teach my kids that, to think long term and to take your time and patience, and, things will work out, and to absorb that. So, maybe that's what I would say to my younger self. It'll work out, but think longer. I wish I had done more investing when I was, 18, like I'm begging my kids to do. I didn't do that. I didn't have that mentorship. I didn't have that vision. So it's very interesting what I didn't know back then.
That's always the case. I once heard a quote that said, everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. And that really, it resonates with me, because there are so many question marks in life and we never know, but we have the power, and with God's help, obviously, to change the reality so that, of course, it will be okay, because there's really no other choice. And I think you have given us so many valuable lessons about, being a businesswoman and building things from scratch, and, changing the whole trajectory of your life without even thinking about it. Just picking up, coming to Israel, that itself is a huge, it's an accomplishment and a huge challenge.
Yeah. I still can't believe I did it.
You and every other immigrant, I think.
I know. I wouldn't change it for a million years. That's the biggest blessing I gave myself and my family, was making Aliyah. So that's something I didn't see in the cards at all when I was younger. I knew I'd come back and forth, but I didn't know I'd come and stay. So I'm really proud to have built it, what I did here, and being in Israel. And I will say, it's like I said this all the time, I wouldn't have done what I did in America. I couldn't imagine myself on Wall Street. I was not really raised in New York or anything. I was raised out of town in Philadelphia, but I didn't have this dream to do this in America. I had this dream of, can I bring money into this country? Can I help it build it? Can I make it grow? And when your basic foundation of the things that you want to do, I think, this is me saying, it's like something good, not just about, I wasn't in this to make money. I wasn't in this for that. I was in it to see what we really could accomplish here. And along the way, it's been a nice parnassa, but I'm saying it wasn't the goal. And I think sometimes you have to really sit back and think what our goals are. Why are we doing what we're doing? Life's short,
all the time.
But
we always have to do that every year.
We always have to think that Are we happy with our day to day? Are we happy with what we're doing? And then when people come to me about changing jobs or changing careers, I'm like, you need to be, life will be a lot better with work if you enjoy what you're doing. It doesn't matter. You want to work for somebody, you don't want to start your own company.
That's
you
my
want to do
tagline.
What?
That's my tagline.
That's your tagline.
Yeah.
That's great. And this podcast is great because it really helps you understand and not be afraid of change. Everybody goes through change. Doesn't matter if you're in the same business. And it's very, very hard. I'll say one last thing is that I know from my age, maybe not, you're a bit younger, but my parents' generation was they had the same job their whole life. Okay?
Absolutely.
And now it's no longer the world. And I tell my kids that just get skills, just get more skills because things are changing so fast that we want to keep up, and we all have to change. Like I remember shifting from being an accountant and going the first time, and my father was like, I don't know how you're doing that. Like, how are you changing? Like, they never changed. The same thing his whole career. And I said, I don't know, I'll figure it out. It wasn't their way of thinking, my parents' generation. So it's very interesting to have to think about that. But we also have to teach our children that. Like, how do we teach our children to accept and adapt to change? It's just a basic anything. People that make Aliyah have already done it. They've made a big change in their life. So normally they actually are more well prepared to make change in business, or in in their careers.
I never thought about that, but I do love that, and it's really true, I think. Thank you so much. I am really happy that we ended up as neighbors and friends, and really proud to have you on the show and in my life.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay.